So in this part of the class, we'll discuss about constructors. So constructors are always associated with classes. So when you instantiate a class, when you create an object of a class, constructor is called. So what basically constructor is, it's a special function, which is called when object is created, or we can say class is initiated. When you create an object of the class, then constructor is called, right? So 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 this is how, if you can see my notes here, are special functions. They are special functions used to initialize data members when the object is created. So this function is called when the object is created, and inside this object, inside this function, inside constructor, what you usually do, you initialize the data members, right? The fields to आप can initialize. You give the initial values to these fields. So for example, again, I'm taking the date example here. So this is, you can see this is the date class, and inside the date class, this is the constructor. Constructor, the name of the constructor function is a function. Constructor is basically a function, is same as the name of the class. So that's why we say it's a special function, because its name is special, right? उसी नाम वही नाम रखना पड़ता है इसका, right? Then only compiler would know that it's a constructor, because if you use the same name as a class name. So that's the format, that's a syntax. Date colon colon date, like same name, class name. This is your class name, right? This is your class name, and this is your name of the constructor. It has to be same. Both of them have to be same, right? And what we are doing here is we are initializing our data fields. We are initializing year equals to 2014, month equals to 1, day equals to 1, whatever you want to initialize. And we call this as a non-parameterized constructor, because we are not passing any parameter to this constructor. We can have another constructor where we can pass parameters, right? Without parameterized constructor is called by compiler. So compiler would call it. So if you're not, see, suppose I create a class where I am not supplying my constructor, default constructor, I'm not supplying it non-parameterized constructor, still function, still the compiler will call constructor. Compiler will automatically create the default constructor. I'll show this on the next slide. Some let's go through some properties of the constructors. Same name as a class name, right? We just saw it. It has to be, it's a rule, you cannot change it. The name of the constructor should be same as the class name. Does not return any value. Does not return, and moreover, we don't use the void here, though it is not returning any value. So we don't use void. Neither we use void, nor it can return any value, because we are not calling it. So how it can return a value to us? It's a default function called by the function. So that's why it has no return value. Automatically called when the class is initiated. That's how we started. When you create an object of a class, instantiate a class, then this will be called automatically. You don't need to specifically call this constructor function. Implicit default constructor. This implicit means if you're not supplying this function, compiler will create a a constructor itself and call it. So we say implicit default constructor. Compiler generates its own if the class does not have one. If class is not providing constructor, compiler will create, खुद उसने create करा और it calls it, because as a protocol it has to call a constructor. If it is not supplied, it will generate automatically and call it. So it will, though it will be useless, nothing will happen in that. Now, if there is no code, compiler will just initialize your variables, your data fields with some random values, right? That's you don't want, right? If you don't supply a constructor to initialize your data fields, compiler will automatically create and just give the random values to your variables, to your data fields. So I'll show some of the code here, and then I'll go to the program. This is another example where we have a parameterized constructor. So you can see here again same date class, and this is the name of the function. Sorry, there's a name of the function same. Both have to be same. And here we are passing the values. Where we are calling this constructor by giving the parameters here. Because we want to set a specific value for a year, month, and day. Year, month, and date. हम specific value set करना चाहते हैं, तो हमने values pass कर दी. Like, so one class can have multiple constructors. We can overload, overloading of functions. We can have multiple functions with same name, but their parameters must be different. Number of parameters, or the types of the parameters must be different. So it's a functional overloading, you know about that, and that's also known as polymorphism, because if one thing can exist in multiple states, कोई function है या object है या class है, if it can exist in multiple states, multiple forms, that processes phenomena is known as polymorphism. Okay, multiple forms. So this is if we have multiple constructors inside a class, this it's a either we say functional overloading or we say polymorphism. So this is another constructor in the date class, which is a parameterized constructor, because we are passing the parameters to the function, to this constructor. So we are passing year, month, and day, and we are initializing our data fields, our data members with these values. So and then we have this. Let's see the code, and then I'll come back to this copy constructor. So see, so this is an example where this part is same. So I'll not repeat this part. I'm defining a date class here. Again, I have the same data members, and then we already discussed this in previous examples. Set date, show date functions. This is something new. This is non-parameterized constructor date, and then uh, we have just no parameter is passed. The name is same as the class name, and then we are doing multiple constructors here. We're doing overloading of constructors. Another constructor name is same date, but we are passing the values here. So these are the default, you know, these are the parameters passed to this date function. So we have third constructor is known as a copy constructor here. So I'll come to this. First of all, let's see this. This is a date constructor, which is non-parameterized. This is a date constructor, which is a parameterized constructor, right? So, so you see, so this is the code of the date constructor. See, I'm setting the default values to year, month, and day. Could default value set कर दी. Year is 1000, month is 1, and day is 1. So it's a 1st January 1000 year. So, and then if it's a parameterized constructor where I'm passing the values of year, month, and day, I'm setting that to data variables. So how we call it from the main function, we create an object of the class, and then we are showing the date, right? पहले हमने date show करी है. तो इस बार अब देखो क्या होगा. When I'm creating the object here, if you see I'm creating the object here, you see यहाँ पे object मैंने create किया. तो इस बार default constructor call होगा, which is non-parameterized one, right? Because I'm not passing the parameters. So constructor will be definitely called, and we are supplying the constructor. Otherwise the implicit constructor call होता, इसमें रैंडम वैल्यू सेट हो जाती है. लेकिन यहाँ पे हमने सेट करा है ईयर 1000, मंथ 1 एंड डे 1, वो कॉल होगा. तो अगर मैं डेट शो करता हूँ तो आप आउटपुट एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं क्या आएगा. आउटपुट विल बी 1st January 1000 ईयर. And then again I'm creating another object of the type d1, right? And this time I'm passing the values. So this time when I'm creating the object of the type d1, I'm creating object of the class state d1 object. I'm passing the default values here. So this time the parameterized constructor will be called. ये फॉर्मेट है उसका. जब डेट d1 डिक्लेयर कर रहे हैं तो साथ में पैरामीटर पास कर रहे हैं. So definitely parameterized constructor होना चाहिए, otherwise system will give an error. Otherwise you cannot call like this. कंपाइल ही नहीं होगा प्रोग्राम आपका. एंड देन वी आर शोइंग द डेट. सो डी पहले शो कर रहे हैं. इट विल शो 1st January 1000 ईयर. और व्हेन वी शो दिस विल शो ईयर 2014 है. इसको 15 कर देते हैं. 15, एंड देन वी हैव डेट, month is 2nd, and day is 13th, right? So this is, let's see this. We'll come back to this copy constructor after we finish this. So now you understand we are discussing two constructor here. One is a non-parameterized constructor, other is a parameterized constructor. So this one is a non-parameterized constructor will be called when we are initiating object here, because we are not passing the parameters. Here we are passing the parameters, so parameterized constructor will be called. So let me increase the size of the property window. So see, first of all, today's date is 1st January 1000 year, which I mentioned that this is calling non-parameterized constructor. And then the D1 object, I'm printing D1 object here. And this time you can see the current date we just passed as a parameter. We parameterized constructor में हमने ये date pass करी थी जब D1 object create किया था. Now we'll see what is copy constructor. Suppose you want to create a copy of D1. यहाँ पे देखो मैंने I'm creating another object of class date. D2 object किया equal to D1 कर दिया. So equal to D1 करने से I'm saying object D2 should be same as object D1. D2 को D1 जैसा बना दो, copy कर लो. So what system will do? System will automatically copy the values from D1 data fields to D2. जो D1 के जो data members हैं उनकी values D2 में copy, because I'm creating a copy here. I'm saying D2 equal to D1. So object D2 will be same as object D1. So same का मतलब है कि सारे data fields same होने चाहिए. राइट ऑब्जेक्ट सारा बिहेवियर सेम होना चाहिए, सॉरी सारी सारी प्रॉपर एट्रीब्यूट सेम होने चाहिए, तो कॉपी हो जाएगा ऑटोमेटिकली. कंपाइलर विल ऑटोमेटिकली क्रिएट अ कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर where it will copy the fields from the old object to the new object or automatically. Or what you can do, you can supply a copy constructor yourself. कि अपना कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर मैं खुद प्रोवाइड करूंगा. सो यू कैन सी दिस इज हाउ योर कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर कि इफ यू आर कॉपिंग वन ऑब्जेक्ट फ्रॉम अदर ऑब्जेक्ट देन दिस फंक्शन शुड बी कॉल्ड. तो यहाँ पे हमने, इफ यू लुक एट दिस, कि D2 ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट कर रहे हैं इक्वल टू D1. तो D2 D2 जब का जो ऑब्जेक्ट है उस क्लास के अंदर, उस इंस्टेंस के अंदर हम क्रिएट फंक्शन कॉल होगा. D1 के अंदर कॉल नहीं होगा, D2 के अंदर कॉल होगा. ये कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर का फंक्शन है. दिस इज द फंक्शन. सी आई जस्ट this is a this one is a copy constructor. Again, name is the constructor का नाम सेम होगा as a class name, and then no, this is not the uh, wait, this is the copy constructor, this one, where we are saying date is the name of the class, this date is the name of the constructors, both of them are same, and we are passing an object of the type date. And remember, it should be by reference, not by value. ये एंड सिंबल आना जरूरी है, बिकॉज बाय रेफरेंस पास करना है हमने. तो अगर हम ये वाला कोड नहीं देते हैं, सपोज इफ आई हाइड दिस, सपोज इफ आई हाइड दिस, let's first of all hide this. It's like supplying your own code for the constructor. I just let's right. So as if I'm not supplying any code for copying one object to other object. It's not there. So if I just rebuild the solution, so in this case you can see what will happen when I say D2 equal to D1. So D1 की values D2 में copy हो जाएंगी. वो देखो when I say show D2 object, show the date of the D2 object will be same as a D1. So if I run this program, you see. So it's showing build error. Let me see what mistake I have done here. Yeah, in the class we need to, because in the definition of the class I mentioned that I'm creating a copy constructor here. So system wants me to supply the implementation of this. So I need to hide this also, because I want to hide this copy constructor where I'm copying one object to another object. So now I'll see. Right, so you can see this is like calling a non-parameterized constructor, and then this is D1 calling parameterized constructor. यहाँ पे ये D2 ऑब्जेक्ट की डेट प्रिंट हुई है. इफ यू लुक एट हेयर माय माउस कर्सर, ये D2 ऑब्जेक्ट है, राइट. तो D2 को हमने कॉपी D1 की बनाई है. हमें D2 is same as a D1, and system ने automatically copy कर दी. We are not supplying the code to copy the data fields of D1 to D2. We are not supplying that code. System is by default, compiler is automatically creating the the code where it is copying the data fields from D1 to D2. This is known as default copy constructor. ये कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर है, डिफॉल्ट कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर है. बट समटाइम्स वी वांट यूजर डिफाइंड कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर. हमें हमें कॉपी करने से पहले कुछ चेंज करना है. हमें फॉर एग्जांपल नेक्स्ट एक ईयर चेंज करना है, सपोज. सो दिस इज हाउ आई सप्लाई द कोड. आई डिफाइन थर्ड कंस्ट्रक्टर व्हिच इज अ कॉपी कंस्ट्रक्टर बिकॉज आई एम कॉपिंग वन ऑब्जेक्ट टू अनदर ऑब्जेक्ट, एंड देन दिस इज द कोड आई सप्लाई हियर, राइट. सो आई एम जस्ट ईयर, ये मैंने जो लिखा वही देख लेते हैं. इसमें आई एम सेइंग comment here that it's a user defined copy constructor, because this, just to know that this constructor is called, not the default one. So I just printing this line in the top, and then I'm saying year I'm keeping same, month मैंने एक बढ़ा दिया, so month February की जगह March print होगा, और day same रखते हैं. So this time when you show date D2, the year will be same 2015, the date will be same 13th, but the month will be March instead of February. Let's say it's a 3 instead of 2, March as compared to February. So if I run this program, see, this is, now you can say they from this, the first two lines are same, from user defined copy constructor. Today's date is, see, it has changed the month from February to March. So this time the constructor we have supplied for copying object is called. And I repeat this part again, that when I call this, this is from the main function. When I'm saying create an object and name it as a D2 of the type date and equal to D1 means अब D2 class के अंदर, this is same as calling, ये इस तरह से ये समझो, this is, ये की मतलब है D2 के अंदर आपने D1 पास कर दिया, it's like this. Yeah, it's saying D2 equal to D1, or you can say you're creating D2 object and passing D1 to this, D1 to this, like this. So it should run, I guess. सो क्लास जो जो D2 ऑब्जेक्ट है उसकी क्लास वाला फंक्शन कॉल हुआ है, D1 वाली कॉल नहीं हुआ, D2 क्लास वाला फंक्शन कॉल हुआ है. Right, so output is same. So this is, either we can use this notation that we are creating D2 object and passing the D1 parameter, so D1 के field D2 में copy हो जाएंगे, and this time the function call will be sent to the class whose object is created in D2. D2 जो D2 create किया है उसकी जो पीछे class है blueprint है, class is also known as a blueprint. I forgot to mention this word, it's a very typical word we say. What is a class? Class is a blueprint of an object, how the object will look like. For example, when you go and buy say for example Honda CRV. So when in the factory you design everything on a paper, that's a blueprint, how your car will look like, what will the kind of engine it would have, and the power of the engine, your steering, your interior seat, everything here, the color of the car. This is a blueprint. And then when you start creating objects, that is, you start creating multiple CRVs which will run on the street. So it's like creating an object, right? You buy a car, I buy a car, your friend buy a car. So it's like we're creating objects of the blueprint which is set up in Honda factory. So class is a blueprint of an object, and when you have to use the class, when you have to practically use the class, you have to create an object, you have to instantiate a class. That's we discussed in the part earlier lecture. So blueprint is a word, blue class is a blueprint of an object. So if I go back to the slide, so this is implicit copy constructor that we discuss. Copies data member values from one object to another object at the time of creation of object. At the time of creation, we are copying, default values we are setting from another object. We are not setting it by default, we are copying it from another object. That's why we say copy constructor. So it's a default copy constructor. फिर भी ये यहाँ पे देखो, अगर सिस्टम अपने आप ही क्रिएट कर लेगा है नहीं है तो ऐसे भी कॉल कर सकते हैं, ऐसे भी कॉल कर सकते हैं. See, this is either we just discuss, we can call this or call this, right? So we already discussed this. This is a user defined copy constructor where we are supplying the code here. You can see we are supplying the code of a constructor here. If we don't provide this function, system will generate itself to copy it. But in case we want to modify the values before they are copied, उनकी formatting करनी है, आपने कुछ change करना है, कुछ करना है, then you supply the copy constructor, and whatever you want to modify before you copy it, you do it here. So now this is another part which is about the static members and static data members and static member functions. So the static word is a new word which we are associating with a class. So static can be a data member can be a static word keyword we can use with a data member or as well as with a member function. दोनों के साथ कर सकते हैं, field के साथ भी और method के साथ भी. और वी यूज फॉर फील्ड की जगह वी यूज द वर्ड डेटा मेंबर के साथ भी, एंड इन केस ऑफ अ मेथड वी यूज द वर्ड मेंबर फंक्शन के साथ. What, why you do static, why you put a static keyword, what functionality you get when you define a method static or a field static. So just I'll read my notes here. These static data members, when you're making data member static, their values remain same in all the instances of a class. That is, only one copy of the static data member is maintained across all objects. So you need to, it's a very fundamental concept, just need to understand when there's a class, and then let's have a diagram here. Let me use a diagram to explain you. So you can see again, we take an example here, student class, and student class can have name of the student. यहाँ पे मैंने define भी किए हैं कुछ field. See, this is my student class. See, it has name of the student, it has roll number of the student, it has center in which student is studying. So for example, if you take with another case, student can be he can study in Pitampura center, or Sadarjung center, or Gurgaon center, or Faridabad center, or any other center he can study. So we'll save here center, and then JE year, in which year he's going to appear in JE, is 2015 or a 16 or 17 or 18. So we saved. So these are the attributes of a student studying in Vidya Mandir. और भी हो सकते हैं, but we're just keeping very limited. I want to keep it very limited because just taking an example. And this is our constructor. We already discussed that student का नाम, class का नाम student है, so name of the constructor will also be same as the name of the class, that is student. And here this is a parameterized constructor. We are passing the parameters here: name of the string, roll number, string, right? So and then this is the method we are defining, show student. And then another, now I'm defining, you see here, I'm defining one static data member, number of students. So I define a static field or static data member, number of students. See here, of the type integer, and I'm defining a static data member function also. Static method भी define कर रहा हूँ, member function define कर रहा हूँ. So purposely I'm using both the words. Method भी मैं बोलता हूँ उसको, member function नहीं बोलता हूँ. Purposely I'm using both the words so that you can go into your mind, because that's a standard terminology that we have to use both the words. Methods भी use होता है quite often, and member function is also used quite often. So I'm defining a static method, get number of students, get student count, get student count, right? And again, it returns an integer value, and again it is static. So we understand why we're defining it static, and what's the purpose. So now, if this is my blueprint of the student class, student ऐसा नजर आएगा, उसकी ये प्रॉपर्टी सेव करने वाले हैं, उसको हम शो भी कर सकते हैं स्क्रीन पे स्टूडेंट को. हम उसको जो काउंट नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स हैं, डिफॉल्ट वैल्यू सेट कर सकते हैं. जब ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करेंगे, नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स कितने हैं वो काउंट कर सकते हैं, और वो प्रिंट भी कर सकते हैं. So now you can see, when we instantiate student class, when we create object of student class, suppose I create first object, मैंने बनाया, उसको सेट कर दिया, नाम उसका रवि is my first student, right? Second is Neha, and third is Samir. So I'm creating 3 students, so I'm instantiating 3 objects of the type student, or 3 blueprint student के 3 मैंने instances बना दी. For example, you produce 3 CRVs in the factory, right? And one you take, one I take, and one maybe your friend will take. So this is like creating 3 objects here of the type student. यहाँ पे उनका JR set कर दिया. For example, Ravi will appear in 2014. Now 14 is gone, so we'll say Ravi will appear in 2016 कर देंगे, because I created this slide last year. So 16, and Neha, or maybe appeared, she would have appeared in the past. 13 may can be, and Samir will appear in 2015, that is this year. Now you can see number of student is same. So you can see ये value तीनों में same है. तो यहाँ पे the moment the if you make a data field, or data member static, then that field will remain same in all the objects. So all the objects share same memory for a static field. If I make a field static, it is not, copies of that field is not created in when you instantiate an object. You created 3 objects, but number of students का जो field है उसकी 3 कॉपी नहीं बनी है, उसकी एक ही कॉपी बनी है, because you say it's a static. इसको static कर दो, fix कर दो. So when you create multiple instances, don't make multiple memory allocations to that field. You just allocate one memory field for this, because we want to retain that values, we want to keep that value same in all the objects. कि जो number of student है वो same रहने चाहिए. How many students we are creating? that should be same in each and every object. We want to make it static fix. It should not change as we suppose आपने पहले रवि क्रिएट किया तो वो उसकी वैल्यू नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट 1 हो गया, फिर आपने ये स्टूडेंट क्रिएट किया डिफॉल्ट वैल्यू इसको भी 1 दे दी, गलत हो गया. नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट तो 2 हो जाना चाहिए 1 के बाद 2, तो उसकी जो मेमोरी एलोकेशन है वो सेम, ऑल द ऑब्जेक्ट्स शेयर द सेम मेमोरी लोकेशन, राइट, फॉर अ स्टैटिक फील्ड. So generally static, there are very specific examples where we use static. Static generally we use when you want, the same value should propagate in all the objects. सारे objects same memory location share करेंगे और सबकी same value होगी. And generally it is used to count number of objects created. कितने object create किए हैं for or something. For example, all are the Vidya Mandir student. Suppose there is a coaching institute. There is I define a field coaching institute, right? I'm creating a class which can be used by Vidya Mandir, or class which can be used by some other coaching center, maybe a Resonance or something. So here, but now I'm implementing the student class for Vidya Mandir only. I just copied, the मैंने कहीं से वो library खरीद ली. I just purchased it and there is a student class. So I just need to set, if I have to, suppose if I'm writing code for Vidya Mandir, but still I need to have this. So I just say, I make it static and say the coaching center is Vidya Mandir, because in every object it's not going to change. It has to, why to make, if there are 1,000 students, why to create 1,000 memory location, and in every memory location we are saying Vidya Mandir coaching students Vidya Mandir, and we're keeping it same. What's the point? We just have to create one memory location, and and every object should share the same memory location. So we make that data field static. उसमें कोचिंग सेंटर का जो फील्ड होगा उसको स्टैटिक कर देंगे, सब ऑब्जेक्ट में सेम ही जाएगा. सो यू सेव मेमोरी दैट वे, राइट. सो पर्पस ऑफ मेकिंग अ डेटा फील्ड स्टैटिक इज इफ यू वांट टू रिटेन द सेम वैल्यू अक्रॉस ऑल द ऑब्जेक्ट्स, कि जब इंस्टेंशिएट करेंगे तो नया कोई मेमोरी लोकेशन नहीं क्रिएट होगा, वही सेम रहेगा जो आपने फर्स्ट ऑब्जेक्ट में क्रिएट किया था. सो राइट, एंड देन स्टैटिक फंक्शंस क्या हैं, स्टैटिक मेथड्स क्या हैं, स्टैटिक मेंबर फंक्शंस क्या हैं. सो स्टैटिक मेंबर फंक्शंस आर यूज्ड to operate on static fields. Static fields, or and in fact other things are static fields. Even if you're not instantiating a class instantiate भी नहीं करी, आपने ऑब्जेक्ट बनाया भी नहीं है, still they exist with the class. क्लास में static field पहले भी होंगे, कि ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करने से फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा, because all the objects share the same field. अगर ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट भी नहीं करते हैं, still they exist in the memory. Still, you can set a value to them without creating an object. क्लास में वैल्यू सेट कर सकते हैं, because वो क्लास सब में सेम ही है. So generally static methods or static member functions are used to manipulate, used to operate on static field. Static field पे काम करने के लिए. You cannot operate static field with non-static methods. Non-static member functions से नहीं कर सकते. Static को static से ही call करना पड़ेगा, set करना पड़ेगा या return करना पड़ेगा. Let's see an example, then it will be more clear to you. First of all, let's go through the facts about the static. Let's go a step back. Yeah, so we started from here. The static data members, these values remain same in all the instances and all the objects of a class. Only one copy of the static member is maintained across all the objects. That's an example I gave you. One copy is maintained across all the objects. Static member functions used to change values of the static data members. कि फंक्शन जो स्टैटिक पे काम करते हैं, नॉन स्टैटिक से स्टैटिक को नहीं कर सकते. सो वी नीड टू डिफाइन स्टैटिक फंक्शंस टू ऑपरेट ऑन स्टैटिक डेटा फील्ड्स if they are made private. Does not. So this is a definition of a student class. This is example I gave you, multiple copies, but this field is same, in all of them. And then some facts about the static member functions and member variables. Static member variables word भी use कर लिया, but it's a data field, static data member. Value of static variable is same for all objects of the class. We discussed this. हर object में value same रहती है, because एक ही memory location use कर रहे हैं. It means shares same memory location for all the instances of a class. They share the same memory location in each and every instance of a class, in each and every object of the class. So value will remain same. Static variables can be public or private. We can define, say, public or private. When we say private, we need to have a function, static function, to access them, to return them, to set them. Right? They are initialized in a special manner. Initialize outside the main function. So to initialize, we'll see in a code how we initialize the value of a static field. उनको स्पेशल तरह से इनिशलाइज करते हैं आउटसाइड द क्लास एंड आउटसाइड द मेन फंक्शन. I'll show you how to initialize them. They are accessed in a different way, that is using the class name. So either they are accessed static field, either they are accessed from the static methods, static member functions access कर सकते हैं उनको, या we can access directly from the class. इस नोटेशन से, ये स्टूडेंट क्लास है, कोलन तो ऑब्जेक्ट से एक्सेस करना है तो स्टैटिक मेथड के थ्रू करना पड़ेगा. अगर ऑब्जेक्ट से करना है अगर तो क्लास से हम ऐसे करेंगे उसको एक्सेस हम, राइट, नम स्टूडेंट्स है। Facts about the static. This is the just the same sheet. Just some more properties of static functions and fields. Static functions are not tied up with specific object. Static function are not tied up with a specific object. You they are with the class. Hence, they can only access using the class name. So this is something which I said on the last sheet. I'm just want to say that again. So the static functions अगर आपने कॉल करने हैं, so you cannot call them from objects. You cannot say, for example, date a student s1. Suppose we create an instance of student class, say s1 dot static method. No. So if you have to call static method, you have to call directly from the class. So class name colon, right, and then you say the name of the static function. So instead of accessing calling them from the object, you have to call them from the class, like the student get student count. So we are calling from the class. Method declared as static can access only static member variable. So if there's a static method, static function है, तो वो खाली static को ही एक्सेस कर सकता है, वो बाकियों को नहीं एक्सेस कर पाएगा, क्योंकि वो तो ऑब्जेक्ट के अंदर है ही नहीं, वो तो क्लास के अंदर है। तो अभी तो फील्ड तो इनिशिएट भी नहीं हुआ है, अभी ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करते हैं तब जाके डेटा मेंबर्स को वैल्यूज असाइन होती है। बट स्टैटिक फंक्शन इज विद अ क्लास, so that's why it cannot access non-static field, it can only access static fields. And let's see an example where we go through all these three things again. So if you see, this is an example where I implemented the student class here. This is we discuss on the PowerPoint. This is the private data members of the student class, where we have a name, we have a roll number, center, JER, and this is a static field I'm defining here, number of students, to count how many students I'm creating in the system, right? And then I have these public construct. There's a constructor. Constructor will always have to be in a public. Constructor public के अंदर ही होगा. So I'm defining a constructor here, student, and it's a default. It's a parameterized constructor because I'm passing these values to this student name and the roll number and the center and the JER. I'm supplying these values. So it's a parameterized constructor. So only one constructor I'm defining here, and then I have a function to show student, to print student on the screen, and then I have a static method to read the counting. Count करने के लिए कितने student create हो चुके हैं system में. So I'm defining a static method which will read the value of the static variable num student. इसकी value read करने के लिए, num student को read करने के लिए I'm defining a function to get student. If you look at the implementation of this, quite straightforward. This is a this is a constructor, parameterized constructor. So when we call this constructor, we'll set up these values. There's one more thing which you need to understand here. So I'm year के साथ मैंने ये I'm just I'm supplying the default value here. Default value constructor. There's a specific name to this default value constructor. So you can check in the notes how we call this. So where your parameterized constructor with the default value. So I'm for these I'm supplying the default values for the center Pitampura and JEA 2015. ये मैंने default value supply कर दी है. So if I call this constructor, I just need to send the name of the person and roll number. I don't need to send this. If I don't send these two values, so automatically it will take Pitampura and year as 2015. So setting up the default values, passing the default values to the constructor. तो ये हम supply कर देंगे values, and then I'm just copying all these to the so this something new here you must be seeing here. So so I don't so this is like, if I don't even write this is same, अगर मैं लिखता नहीं हूँ तब भी ये चल जाएगा. But sometimes what we do, I need to see, this is a pointer. I'm assuming here you have done the pointers topic, you understand the pointer. So this is kind of a pointer which points to its own object. कि जब ऑब्जेक्ट हमने क्रिएट किया तो उसके बाद यहाँ पे आए हम, तो जो ऑब्जेक्ट ऑब्वियसली ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट हुआ है उसी के अंदर हमने क्लास का मेथड कॉल किया। व्हेन वी इंस्टेंशिएट इन क्लास वी क्रिएट एन ऑब्जेक्ट, वी कॉल दिस मेथड ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्ट। जो भी ब्लूप्रिंट है वही हमने कॉल किया। कॉल करने के बाद अब हम उसी ऑब्जेक्ट के अंदर जो नेम फील्ड है उसे पॉपुलेट करना चाहते हैं इस नेम से। तो उसी ऑब्जेक्ट जिसके अंदर ये कोड कॉल हुआ है उसी ऑब्जेक्ट के अंदर जो सो दिस पॉइंटर, दिस इज स्पेसिफिक नेम फिक्स कीवर्ड है ये, दिस पॉइंट्स टू इटसेल्फ। खुद ही ऑब्जेक्ट इसी ऑब्जेक्ट के अंदर है, उसी ऑब्जेक्ट को हमें पॉइंट करना है, उसी ऑब्जेक्ट का हमें नेम लेना है। अगर आप नहीं भी मेंशन करोगे तब भी चल जाएगा ये, क्योंकि नेम तो ऑलरेडी है इसमें, लेकिन इस बार मेंशन करना पड़ेगा ये भी नेम है, ये भी नेम है। या तो यहाँ पे नेम वन कर दूं, देन आई डोंट नीड टू यूज दिस पॉइंटर, नेम वन कर दिया, सो नेम इक्वल टू नेम वन। Name is the data field and name one is the parameter that we are supplying in the function. Then it's no problem. I say name equal to name one. But ये भी name है, इसको भी हमने name रखा हुआ है, सॉरी, इसको भी name रखा है हमने, और इसको भी नेम कर दिया, दोनों नेम है। सो वील हैव टू सी ये जो नेम है लेफ्ट जिसको पॉपुलेट कर रहे हैं वो नेम, वो पॉइंट जो ऑब्जेक्ट है उसका डेटा फील्ड है, वो उसका वो डेटा मेंबर है। तो दिस पॉइंटर यूज करते हैं, दिस मीन्स ऑब्जेक्ट का पार्ट है। सो दिस नेम इक्वल टू नेम, दिस रोल नंबर इक्वल टू रोल नंबर, दैट वे। सो वी यूज दिस पॉइंटर विच इज अ पॉइंटर विच इज पॉइंटिंग टू इटसेल्फ, ऑब्जेक्ट खुद पॉइंट कर रहा है। एंड देन व्हाट वी आर डूइंग हियर इज, एक जो स्टैटिक फील्ड है हमारा नम स्टूडेंट्स, उसको हम प्लस प्लस कर रहे हैं। सो व्हेनेवर वी क्रिएटिंग ए न्यू ऑब्जेक्ट वी आर एडिंग द नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स फील्ड। नम स्टूडेंट्स को हम एक से बढ़ा रहे हैं, सो जस्ट बिकॉज नम स्टूडेंट इज टू काउंट नंबर ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट्स वी आर क्रिएटिंग। सो जो व्हेनेवर एंड दिस विल फिर डेफिनेटली व्हेन वी क्रिएट एन ऑब्जेक्ट दिस कंस्ट्रक्टर विल बी कॉल्ड। जब ये स्टूडेंट ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करने का कंस्ट्रक्टर कॉल होगा, और वहां पे हमने नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स को अपडेट कर दिया टू काउंट हाउ मेनी ऑब्जेक्ट्स, हाउ मेनी इंस्टेंसेस वी आर क्रिएटिंग। And this is to show the students all the cout statement to print the properties of the student on the screen. And then we have, this is how we initialize the static field, like this, right, outside the main function, outside the class। जैसे इम्प्लीमेंटेशन आप मेंबर डेटा मेंबर फंक्शंस की इम्प्लीमेंटेशन देते हैं उस तरह से ही दिया है इसको, स्टूडेंट कोलन कोलन नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स इक्वल टू जीरो, इनिशियलाइज कर दिया जीरो से इसको। इट कैन नॉट गो इन द मेन स्टेटमेंट, मेन में नहीं जा सकता, उसके बाहर ही होना पड़ेगा। एंड देन वी हैव, दिस इज द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ द स्टैटिक मेथड की इम्प्लीमेंटेशन है कि it is just returning the number of count of the number of students, get number of student count, it is returning the value of the static field, that is number of students created in the system. So now if you see an example here, so first of all I'm initially printing the number of students, which will be 0 of course, and then I'm creating a student Amit here as ID, and I'm not supplying the center and the J here because this is like a default, मैंने default already set कर दिया। And then I'm creating second student Sandeep and passing the roll number ID था क्या, the second field is the roll number. So if the roll number of Amit is 100 and that of Sandeep is 101, and then I'm printing the student count। अब काउंट ऑटोमेटिकली 2 हो गया होगा क्योंकि ऑटोमेटिकली अपडेट कर रहे हैं कंस्ट्रक्टर के अंदर हम। एंड देन आई एम प्रिंटिंग बोथ द स्टूडेंट्स हेयर। सो इट्स एन एग्जांपल टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज द स्टैटिक फील्ड। स्टैटिक फील्ड में वो जो उसकी वैल्यू है, राइट, उसकी वैल्यू जो स्टूडेंट के अंदर हमने रन किया, नंबर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स को 1 कर दिया जब ये क्रिएट किया ऑब्जेक्ट, इसे कंस्ट्रक्टर में 1 कर दिया। व्हेन वी आर क्रिएटिंग एन ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द टाइप स्टूडेंट, S2 ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द टाइप स्टूडेंट, एंड देन इसके कंस्ट्रक्टर में उसको नम स्टूडेंट्स को 1 से बढ़ा दिया है, तो सेम कॉपी थी वो बढ़ गया है, राइट। वो प्लस प्लस करने से वो वैल्यू बढ़ गई है बिकॉज दे शेयर द सेम फील्ड। तो दोनों ऑब्जेक्ट, इसके अंदर भी नम स्टूडेंट्स हैं, S1 में भी नम स्टूडेंट्स है, S2 में भी नम स्टूडेंट है, वो सेम नम स्टूडेंट फील्ड है, सब एक ही है क्योंकि वहाँ स्टैटिक कर दिया, वो सेम कॉपी होगी उसकी, सेम मेमोरी लोकेशन है, सो वो बढ़ जाएगा, 2 हो जाएगा। if I run this program, see, first of all, so this is number of students, see, it is printing 2, and then we are printing the properties of the Amit and the properties of the Sandeep. You can see that center is automatically picked as Pitampura and JA is automatically picked as 2015 and number of students equals to 2. So yeah, so in this case you can see how students dot get student count. Just a minute. So there are two statements to print student. If I run this now, so yes, वो दिखा ये रहा यहाँ पे जीरो दिखा नहीं था. So this is zero. So initially the value of the number of student is zero because we are printing this before creating any object. तो zero यहाँ दिखा नहीं था, मुझे 0 ऊपर आ रहा है. So another thing which I want to mention here, which I think that earlier I mentioned that, which I think I mentioned wrong. In from the object also we can call the static method. Right, initially we said I can call it, then I said you cannot call it, but clearly we can see हम s1 ऑब्जेक्ट में से कॉल कर रहे हैं गेट स्टूडेंट काउंट. सो स्टैटिक मेथड हम ऑब्जेक्ट में से भी कॉल कर सकते हैं. राइट, डजेंट मैटर. और वैल्यू सेम ही आएगी. आप उससे ये अगर आप s2 से भी कॉल करेंगे तो सेम ही आंसर आएगा, क्योंकि बिकॉज दे एक्सेस स्टैटिक फील्ड, दोनों सेम है स्टैटिक फील्ड. तो अगर देखने के लिए आप देख भी सकते हैं कि अगर s2 में से कॉल करेंगे उसको, S2 का S2 में से the copy memory is same, so this shows the static thing. You're getting get student from S1, student count from S1, and you're getting get student count from S2. The value will remain same. दोनों में 2 आएगी because they share the same memory location. और अब उसको ऐसे भी एक्सेस कर सकते हैं, यहाँ से भी ले लो इसको इधर फ्रॉम द क्लास. सो इधर यू कैन स्टैटिक फील्ड की वैल्यू तीनों तरह से कर सकते हैं. क्लास से भी ले सकते हैं आप, यू कैन डायरेक्टली रीड फ्रॉम द क्लास, यू कैन रीड फ्रॉम द स्टूडेंट S1 ऑब्जेक्ट और स्टूडेंट S2 ऑब्जेक्ट, एंड आंसर विल कम आउट टू बी सेम. 2 2 2 तीनों केस में आएगा. इफ यू रन दिस, see here, so 2 is printed 3 times. 2 2 2 3 बार 2 प्रिंट हुआ. वो जीरो ऊपर आ रहा है, ये इसको जीरो इसकी वजह से आ रहा था ये. Right now you can see 2 is printed 3 times. Right, just because from the S1 object we have printed number of students, from S2 we are printing number of students, from directly class we are printing the value of the number of students through static. So तीनों हमने static के थ्रू कॉल किया. सॉरी, थर्ड वाला हमने डायरेक्ट प्रिंट किया, स्टैटिक मेथड भी कॉल नहीं किया, डायरेक्टली फील्ड की वैल्यू प्रिंट कर दी है. थर्ड वाले में आप देखो, अच्छा नहीं सॉरी, स्टैटिक से कॉल किया, बट डायरेक्टली भी कर सकते हैं सीधा भी आप. यहाँ पे नम काउंट्स है वो भी, बिकॉज इट्स नम, बिकॉज नो आई डोंट थिंक इट इज पब्लिक. तो नहीं, बेसिकली यस या वी कैन नॉट डायरेक्टली कॉल द स्टैटिक फील्ड here. Our static field is under the private, so that's why we cannot directly call it from the class, because we have defined it under private. So num student सीधा आप मेन फंक्शन से कॉल नहीं कर पा रहे. अगर आप इसको प्राइवेट पब्लिक में ले जाओगे, इस फील्ड को, स्टैटिक फील्ड को पब्लिक कर दोगे, तो फिर स्टैटिक मेंबर की जरूरत डेटा स्टैटिक मेंबर फंक्शन की जरूरत नहीं है. फिर हम डायरेक्टली क्लास से कॉल कर सकते हैं, मेन में डायरेक्टली कॉल कर सकते हैं, बट दिस टाइम वी हैव टू कॉल इट फ्रॉम अ स्टैटिक फंक्शन. फंक्शन से ही कॉल करना पड़ेगा हमें यहाँ पे. ये सॉरी, यहाँ पे हमने स्टैटिक फंक्शन से ही कॉल किया था गेट, राइट, क्योंकि बिकॉज ऑफ प्राइवेट है, डायरेक्टली हम फील्ड को एक्सेस नहीं कर सकते बिकॉज ऑफ द प्राइवेट नेचर ऑफ इट. Right, so this is about the static thing. So quickly, if I go through quickly read the properties of it. Values of static variables is same for all the objects of the class. We have seen it from S1 से भी हमने count देखा है, S2 से भी count देखा है, सब जगह सेम ही count आया था because they share the same memory location. Static variables can be public or private. हमने उनको मेथड को हमने पब्लिक रखा था और फील्ड को हमने प्राइवेट रखा था. प्राइवेट से पब्लिक भी कर सकते हैं उसको, एंड देन इफ यू मेक इट पब्लिक, यू कैन एक्सेस इन द मेन फंक्शन डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम द क्लास नेम. They initialize in a special manner. We have seen it, class name colon and the value of the field equal to ऐसे initialize किए हमने. They are accessed in a different way. They are accessed in a different way using class name. We discussed this. Static functions are not tied up with specific objects. Static function object से नहीं है, उनको हम directly भी call कर सकते हैं हमने. So you can see if you remember the code, the first line of the code I wrote it, class name colon and the static function की value मैंने print करी थी 0. तो class के object भी नहीं बनाए थे, उससे पहले ही मैंने उस function को call कर लिया था, static function को. Get student count. So this is how we see the game. इसको मैंने class name से call कर लिया था static function को, without even declaring it, without even instantiating this class. Method declared as static can access only static member variable. Right, so if you define a method static, it can only get a static thing, it can only access static fields, it cannot access non-static field because वो object create करने के बाद ही आते हैं वो. तो ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट नहीं हुआ तो दैट्स व्हाई वी कैन नॉट एक्सेस देम.